The relentless sound of the rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive office seemed to echo the storm that Isabel Sterling felt deep within her chest. Sitting in the worn leather chair in front of her father's mahogany desk, she watched the tense expressions of the men surrounding her with a heavy heart. The scent of strong coffee and ancient, dusty paper permeated the room, mixing with the chilling, ethereal fragrance of Rowan Montgomery, who remained standing in the darkest corner, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "Isabel, you understand the gravity of our situation, do you not?" The voice of her father, Richard Sterling, sounded far more fragile than she had ever heard it before. The deep wrinkles on his face seemed to have carved themselves further into his skin over the last few months. Ever since the financial hemorrhaging of Sterling and Sons had become an unsustainable wound. She swallowed hard, her amber eyes scanning the documents. Debts, legal protests, and threats of tax execution stared back at her like vultures. "I understand that you are desperate, Father," she replied, her voice remaining firm despite the internal tremor. "But marriage is not a business transaction to be brokered over cold coffee and spreadsheets." Rowan stepped forward then, his long, predatory strides echoing on the dark hardwood floor with a chilling precision. He was an imposing figure who appeared 32 years of age, though his eyes carried the silent weight of centuries. He was Rowan Montgomery, the undisputed vampire king of the Pacific Northwest, a man whose family, or rather, his coven, had controlled the hidden ley lines of wealth in San Francisco for generations. His dark hair was swept back with effortless elegance, and his silver-blue eyes, which held a faint, unnatural glow, seemed to calculate every heartbeat in the room. "Miss Sterling," he began, his voice a deep, resonant velvet that felt like a physical touch. "I will not insult your intelligence by pretending this is a romantic endeavor. I require a mortal queen to satisfy the social contracts of the High Council, and to solidify my standing among human institutions. You require the resources of my ancient estate to save your family's legacy. It is a fair exchange of survival for gold. Simple." Isabel turned around, her eyes flashing with a volatile mixture of anger and despair. "You are talking about my life as if it were a line item in a ledger. And I am offering you the only chance to save it," Rowan retorted, stepping closer until he was only a few inches away. Isabel could feel the unnatural, chilling cold that emanated from him, contrasting with the warmth of the room. He smelled of frozen rain and crushed violets. 3 years of marriage, Isabel. You maintain your independence and your professional projects, appearing as my consort in public only when necessity dictates. After 36 months, we will dissolve the union on amicable terms, and you will be free, with your family's company restored to its former glory. And what if I fall in love? The question escaped her lips before she could catch it. Rowan's lips curled into a smile, but it was not a warm expression. It was the sharp, beautiful glint of a predator. Under the laws of the night, that would be a very complicated complication, he murmured. Richard Sterling rose from his chair, approaching his daughter with hesitant steps. Isabel, my dear, if there were any other path through this darkness, I would take it. But we are facing ruin. She closed her eyes, the weight of her heritage pressing down. When she opened them again, her decision was etched in the stillness of her gaze. Very well, King Rowan. I accept your cold terms. 3 weeks later, Isabel Montgomery observed her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror of the walk-in closet in their estate in Aspen. The simple white silk dress she had worn for the private ceremony was already tucked away, replaced by an array of expensive garments Rowan had insisted on providing. The platinum band on her finger felt heavier than it had any right to be. A cold reminder of the bargain she had struck with the king of vampires. The mansion was a masterpiece of modernist architecture, carved directly into the mountain rock. It was filled with clean lines, massive panes of glass, and gardens that were meticulously maintained despite the thin, freezing mountain air. Every room was decorated with an impeccable, refined taste, yet there was an underlying chill that Isabel could not define. It was a palace built for an immortal, but it lacked the warmth of a living home. "Good morning, Mrs. Montgomery." The voice of Clara, the housekeeper, arrived accompanied by a gentle, rhythmic knock. "His Majesty, Mr. Rowan, asked me to inform you that he traveled to Newark early this morning. He will not return until Thursday evening." Isabel opened the door, meeting the kind, maternal face of Clara. The woman, in her 50s, was one of the few humans employed in the house who truly knew Rowan's nature. "Thank you, Clara. Did he leave any other message?" "Only that you should feel free to use his private library, should you need a quiet place to work on the Sterling & Sons projects." Over the last few days, Isabel had been torn between adapting to this surreal new life and trying to resurrect her family's business with the massive financial influx Rowan had provided. It was peculiar how he maintained such a respectful, almost formal distance, even though they shared the same roof. They slept in separate wings, she in the sun-drenched southern suite, and he in the shadowed northern chambers. Their interactions were limited to occasional dinners and clinical conversations about logistics. Yet, Isabel had noticed small, quiet gestures of consideration. Her favorite architectural books would appear on the library table. Fresh wildflowers were placed in her room every morning, and her coffee was always prepared exactly how she liked it. Descending the spiral staircase, Isabel made her way to Rowan's study. The room was masculine and sober, filled with the scent of old leather and expensive ink, with a privileged view of the pine forests. On the desk, she found a folder containing the latest documents from her father's firm and a handwritten note in elegant, sharp script. "Isabel, I hope these logistical updates help place Sterling & Sons back on the path to prosperity. I have great faith in your professional potential. R." She held the paper for a moment, feeling a strange flutter in her chest. It was not passion, but a growing, dangerous curiosity about the vampire king she had married. Rowan Montgomery was known in the business world for his legendary coldness and ruthless efficiency, but these small, silent acts of kindness suggested a complexity that intrigued her far more than his wealth ever could. The ringing of her phone suddenly interrupted her thoughts. "Isabel!" The animated voice of her best friend, Madeline, exploded through the speaker. "How is life as the wife of the most mysterious and coveted man in the country? Does he really have that magnetic charm everyone whispers about?" Isabel laughed, sitting in the large chair behind the desk. "Madeline, please, you make it sound like a fairy tale, and we both know it is anything but that. He is a gentleman, in his own distant way, but we are strangers sharing a house. I know it started as an arrangement," Madeline countered, "but the man is hauntingly beautiful and incredibly powerful. Perhaps love will find a way through the shadows." "Love was not part of the contract, Madeline," Isabel teased, though her voice carried a faint note of melancholy. "Contracts can be renegotiated," her friend retorted. "Look, I have to go, but promise me we will meet this week." After hanging up, Isabel sat in the silence of the study. Through the window, she watched the gardener tending to the roses Rowan had ordered to be planted. They were her favorite variety. The afternoon light was golden and soft. Perhaps Madeline was right. Perhaps there was room for something more in this cold agreement. 1 month into the marriage, Isabel woke up with a haunting sensation in her stomach. The aroma of the morning coffee, which normally acted as a pleasant wake-up call, now caused an inexplicable, violent wave of nausea. She rose quickly from the bed, rushing to the marble bathroom of her suite. After several minutes of deep breathing in front of the mirror, Isabel tried to rationalize the feeling. Perhaps it was merely the stress of living with an immortal king. The last few days had been incredibly intense at the construction firm, with new projects launching and the immense pressure of rebuilding the company's reputation. Rowan had returned from Newark the previous Thursday, bringing with him several government contracts that would fundamentally alter the future of Sterling and Sons for the better. Descending for breakfast, she found Rowan already seated at the terrace table, reading the newspaper. He was impeccable, wearing a black silk shirt that made his pale skin look like polished marble. When he saw her arrive, he lowered the paper and observed her with a sharp, piercing intensity. "Good morning," he said, noting the paleness of her cheeks. "You do not look well, Isabel. Is the altitude of Aspen affecting you?" "Good morning. I am just a bit tired," she responded, sitting down. When Clara brought the coffee, the strong scent made her stomach turn once more. "Actually, I think I will only have some herbal tea today." Rowan frowned, folding his newspaper with deliberate slowness. "You have not been eating properly for the last few days. Is there something I can provide?" The concern in his voice felt genuine, and Isabel was surprised by how much it moved her. In the recent weeks, they had developed a comfortable routine. Dinners together, long discussions about architectural theory, and debates over classical literature. It was a respectful companionship that was gradually deepening into something she couldn't name. "The new projects are demanding," she admitted, accepting a cup of chamomile tea. "But it is good to be busy." Rowan studied her for a moment, his silver blue eyes revealing a depth she was still learning to navigate. "Isabel, I know our agreement is practical, but that does not mean you should sacrifice your health. If you need assistance, let me know." "I know," she interrupted softly, "and I am grateful. You have been—" she hesitated. "More than considerate." A comfortable silence settled between them. Rowan returned to his paper, but Isabel noticed he was watching her discreetly. "I have a meeting in the city today," he mentioned after a while. "But perhaps we could have dinner out tonight? I know a restaurant in Newark that you might find agreeable." Isabel smiled. "That would be wonderful." Later that afternoon at the Sterling and Sons office, Isabel was trying to focus on blueprints when the nausea returned with a vengeance. This time, it was far more intense. She rushed to her private bathroom, staying there for several minutes to compose herself. "Isabel?" The worried voice of her assistant, Caleb, came from the other side of the door. "Is everything all right?" "I am fine, Caleb. Just give me a moment." When she emerged, she found Madeline sitting in her office chair with an expression of intense curiosity. "Your secretary let me in," Madeline explained, standing up to hug her friend. "Isabel, you look terrible. What is going on?" Isabel sank into a visitor's chair, running her hands through her dark hair. "I don't know. I've been feeling strange for days. Nauseous, exhausted, lightheaded." Madeline, being a skilled physician, watched her with clinical but caring eyes. "Isabel, when was your last cycle?" The question hit Isabel like a physical blow. She looked at her friend, then at the calendar on the wall, her eyes widening. "Very late." "That is impossible, Madeline," she whispered. "Rowan, he is a vampire king. He is biologically sterile. His kind cannot produce life. It is the curse of his immortality." Madeline leaned forward. "Isabel, are you absolutely certain?" Because these symptoms are unmistakable. No, Isabel shook her head. This cannot be happening. In the late afternoon, Isabel drove through the streets of Aspen, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. In the passenger seat, a small pharmacy bag held 3 different pregnancy tests. Madeline had offered to stay with her. But Isabel needed to process this impossible reality alone first. The mansion had never seemed so imposing as it did at that moment, a fortress of shadows and secrets. She parked in the garage and sat in the car for several minutes, trying to organize the chaos in her mind. If the tests confirmed her suspicions, everything would change. Their marriage of convenience would become a scandal of supernatural proportions. Clara greeted her at the door, mentioning that Rowan would arrive in 1 hour for dinner. Isabel hurried to her room, locking the door. In the white marble bathroom, she followed the instructions. 5 minutes had never passed so slowly. When the second line appeared, clearly visible, Isabel sank to the cold floor. The second test confirmed it. The third did as well. 3 pink lines that changed the world. She was pregnant. But how? Rowan was the king of the night. His body was a vessel of ancient power, but it was not meant for the creation of new life. It was a well-known law of their kind. The turning process at 20 years of age froze the body in time, rendering them incapable of fatherhood. Rowan had even mentioned it during the contract negotiations as a reason why she needn't fear any accidental heirs. The sound of his car in the driveway made her jump. She hid the tests, washed her face, and tried to reconstruct her mask of composure. When she went down for dinner, Rowan was already in the living room. "Did you cancel our reservation?" he asked, noticing she wasn't ready. "I apologize. I am feeling quite unwell," Isabel replied, avoiding his gaze. Rowan observed her closely. There was a new tension in her posture, a vibration he could sense with his heightened perception. "Isabel, what is happening? You have been acting differently for days." "Differently? How?" She poured herself a glass of water, her hands still shaking. "Distant. Worried. And now you are clearly agitated." He set down his glass and approached her, his presence cold and commanding. "Talk to me." Isabel took a deep breath. "Rowan," she began, her voice weaker than she intended. "I need to tell you something." He sat on the sofa beside her, maintaining a respectful but attentive distance. "I am listening. I am pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Isabel watched the expressions flicker across Rowan's face. Shock, confusion, and then a cold, hard anger that made the air in the room drop several degrees. "What do you mean you are pregnant?" His voice was low and controlled, but she could feel the power radiating from him like a physical weight. "Isabel, that is a biological impossibility for my kind." "I know it is impossible," she exploded, standing up. "Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I planned this?" Rowan stood up as well, his eyes glowing with a faint, dangerous silver light. "No, I apologize. That isn't what I meant." He took a breath. "Isabel, you must understand something. I cannot have children. It is not a matter of low probability. It is a fundamental law of the night." "Then explain this to me," Isabel cried, gesturing to her stomach. "Explain how I am 1 month pregnant, Rowan, because I have not been with anyone else since the day we met." The implicit accusation hung in the air. Rowan looked her in the eyes, and Isabel saw something break in his expression. "Are you accusing me of lying about my condition?" His voice was dangerously soft. "I am trying to understand how this is possible," she whispered, tears finally falling. "Because if you can have children, Rowan, if you lied about this, then our entire marriage was built on a lie." Rowan stepped back as if struck. When he spoke again, his voice was filled with a pain she hadn't expected. "Isabel, I have never lied to you about this. Never. But if you are pregnant," he paused, "then someone is lying to both of us." The tension was palpable as Rowan walked out of the room without another word, leaving Isabel alone. An hour later, Rowan returned, this time with a determined expression and a folder of ancient-looking documents in his hands. Isabel was on the balcony, watching the moon, trying to make sense of the impossible. "Isabel." His voice was calmer now, but still thick with gravity. "I need to show you something." She turned, noticing the medical records, some modern, some written on yellowed parchment. Rowan approached, spreading out a series of reports. "These are my records from the last 10 years, he said, his voice formal. "The result of the transformation accident when I was 20. The trauma to my physical form was absolute. The elders and the modern specialists were categorical." Isabel took the documents with trembling hands. The terms were complex, but the conclusion was unmistakable. Absolute sterility. Date after date, century after century, every record reached the same verdict. "Rowan, she started, but he held up a hand. "I have scheduled an appointment for tomorrow morning with Dr. Harrison, a specialist who understands my unique biology. I will redo every exam." He paused, looking directly at her. "And you will undergo a DNA test for the child as soon as it is safe." The coldness in his tone made her flinch. "Do you truly believe that I don't know what to believe," Rowan interrupted. "Isabel, understand my position. For over a century, I have lived with the certainty that I could never be a father. It was the very reason I agreed to this arrangement. There was no risk of emotional or familial complications. And now you think I betrayed you?" The statement was a wounded whisper. Rowan looked at her for a long time. "I want to believe you. But the facts? The facts are that I am pregnant, and you are the only man I have been with," Isabel said, her voice regaining its strength. "If this is medically impossible, then perhaps the laws of the night are not as absolute as you think." They stood in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. The full moon illuminated the garden, casting long shadows. Isabel felt another wave of nausea. "Rowan," she said softly, "regardless of what the exams show, I need you to know that I never lied to you. Not about this, not about anything." He looked at her, and for a fleeting second, she saw the vulnerable man behind the kingly mask. "I want to believe you," he repeated. The next morning, Rowan left early for the clinic. Isabel stayed home, unable to focus on work. Clara had prepared dry toast and ginger tea. Evidently, her condition had not gone unnoticed by the staff. Madeline called around 10 o'clock. "How did he react?" she asked. "Poorly," Isabel replied, recounting the events. "Isabel, you need proper prenatal care," Madeline said. "I will recommend an excellent obstetrician. And about the DNA test, he wants to do it," Isabel interrupted. "It's understandable given the circumstances." When Rowan returned in the afternoon, Isabel was in his study. He entered silently, dropping a folder on the desk. "Today's exams confirmed the previous ones," he said, his voice neutral. "My biological status remains unchanged." Isabel looked at him, noting the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. "And now?" "Now we wait," Rowan replied. Dr. Harrison explained that there are exceedingly rare cases of spontaneous regeneration in our kind, especially after a century of stasis. Less than 1% of cases, but it exists. 1%, Isabel repeated. "He wants to monitor this. He said if the baby is truly mine, it would represent an extraordinary miracle." "Rowan, are you actually considering the possibility that I am telling the truth?" He was silent for a long moment. "Isabel, watching your reaction, I have started to think that perhaps—" He struggled with the words. "Perhaps miracles do exist, even for the damned." 2 weeks passed in a delicate, strange routine. Rowan had become even more attentive, but he maintained an emotional distance that felt like an invisible wall. He accompanied her to the first medical appointments, met Dr. Edward, the obstetrician, and listened intently to every detail of the pregnancy. Isabel was now in her 10th week, and the morning sickness was beginning to subside. Rowan had instructed Clara to keep specific snacks available at all times, and he had even begun taking his meals in the far wing so the scent wouldn't bother her. On a rainy Thursday, Isabel was resting on the sofa when Rowan arrived home early. He carried a bag from a bookstore and a hesitant smile. "How are you feeling?" he asked, approaching her. "A bit better today," she replied. "What did you bring?" Rowan pulled out several books on pregnancy and child development. "I thought, perhaps we should be prepared for all possibilities." Isabel felt a surge of warmth. "Rowan, does this mean you—" "It means I am trying to accept what my eyes are seeing." He sat beside her. "Isabel, regardless of the circumstances, if there is a child, and if there is a possibility, it is mine." "There is no possibility, Rowan," she said softly. "It is yours." They looked at each other, the sound of the rain filling the silence. "Tell me about when you found out," Rowan said suddenly. "How did you feel?" "Terrified," she admitted. "Not just because of the baby, but because I knew it would change everything between us." "Has it?" Rowan asked. "It has," she agreed. "But maybe not in the way we expected." "How so?" Rowan leaned forward, his silver eyes softening. "Isabel, when I married you, I thought it was a simple deal. A 3-year contract. But in these last few weeks, I found myself thinking about what it would be like if this were real. If we were a real family." Isabel's heart hammered. "And what would it be like?" Rowan looked her in the eyes. Terrifying and wonderful. The moment was interrupted by Clara, who appeared with a worried look. "Pardon me, but there is a man at the door for Mrs. Isabel. He says he is from the laboratory." Rowan and Isabel exchanged glances. "Send him in," Rowan said. A young man in a white lab coat entered, looking nervous in the presence of the Vampire King. "Mrs. Montgomery, I am from the Central Analysis Lab. I have the results of the paternity test requested by Dr. Harrison. The results are here." Rowan took the envelope with steady hands. He tore it open. The silence in the room stretched as he read. His expression shifted from tension to confusion, and finally to absolute shock. "Rowan?" Isabel whispered. He looked up, his voice hoarse. "It's mine. The baby is mine. My body, it regenerated." The envelope slipped from Rowan's fingers, drifting to the floor. Isabel stood frozen, processing the words. The lab technician murmured an excuse and slipped away. "Repeat that," Isabel whispered. Rowan stepped toward her, his silver eyes shimmering with awe. "The baby is mine, Isabel. Biologically, indisputably, mine." The tears she had been holding for weeks finally broke free. Rowan wrapped his arms around her for the first time with true intent, and she collapsed against him, feeling the solid, cold strength of his body. "How is it possible?" she murmured. "I don't know," he whispered back. "But it happened. We happened." They stayed that way for long minutes, anchored to each other. When they finally pulled apart, Rowan cupped her face. "Isabel, I need to ask your forgiveness. For doubting you. For being cold." "You had every reason to doubt," she interrupted. "But I have come to know you, Isabel," he continued. "I should have trusted what my heart was telling me. not just the records from a century ago. Isabel smiled through her tears. And what was your heart telling you? Rowan smiled back, a genuine, disarming smile. It was telling me that I was falling in love with my own wife. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Isabel felt her heart soar. Rowan, I know our contract was different. I want to throw the contract away, he said quickly. I want to start over. Can we try to make this real? In response, Isabel stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. It was a soft kiss at first, then deep and full of promises. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I think it's too late to try, she whispered. I'm already in love with you, too. That night, they had dinner on the terrace, but everything was different. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by smiles and touches. Rowan talked about his long, lonely life and how he had given up on the idea of a family. Isabel shared her dreams for the company and her fears of being a mother. You are going to be a wonderful mother, Rowan said. How can you be so sure? Because I see you every day. I see how you care for everyone around you, how you fought for your father's legacy, he smiled, how you tried to protect me even when I was being a fool. Isabel laughed. You weren't a fool. You were cautious. I was a coward, he corrected, afraid to admit that this marriage became the best thing to ever happen to me long before we knew about the baby. Later, when they went upstairs, Rowan stopped at her door. We have kept separate rooms, he said hesitantly, but I would very much like to wake up next to you. Isabel smiled. I think we've waited long enough, she said. 3 weeks later, the routine in the Aspen mansion had transformed. Isabel would wake up in Rowan's arms, and he had developed a habit of whispering to her belly every morning. The pregnancy was progressing perfectly. She was in her 13th week, and the nausea was gone. Good morning, little one, Rowan murmured against her skin one sunny Saturday. Today, your father is taking your mother to choose your nursery. Isabel ran her fingers through his dark hair. Isn't it a bit early for that? It's never too early to plan, he replied, kissing her. I want you to choose everything. The colors, the furniture. I want it to be exactly as you imagined. They had decided to convert one of the large guest suites into a nursery with a view of the mountains. During breakfast, Clara brought the mail. Among the letters was an elegant invitation. The annual Business Association Gala, Rowan noted. I usually go for appearances, but if you aren't feeling up to it. I want to go, Isabel said. I want to be by your side. Rowan smiled. It will be our first public appearance as a real couple. Do you think people will notice? It will be impossible not to, he replied. I am a different man since I fell in love with you. Isabel felt that familiar flutter. Rowan, she said seriously, we need to talk about the practical things. The contract, the 3-year limit. None of it makes sense anymore. Rowan stood up, went to his study, and returned with the original contract. I was thinking the same thing, he said. Isabel, I want to destroy this. Start from scratch. Marry you for real. For love. Isabel's eyes filled with tears. Are you proposing to me again? Rowan knelt beside her chair. Isabel Sterling Montgomery, would you marry me for real this time? To build a family? To love and support each other? To raise our child together? Yes, she breathed, pulling him into a kiss. Rowan took the contract and tore it into pieces, the paper fluttering away in the breeze. What about the money you invested in the firm? She asked. The financial terms. Rowan stopped her. I don't care about the money, Isabel. The company is yours, which means it is mine. We are a family. What is mine is yours." Later that day, they walked through the room that would be the nursery. "What color are you thinking?" Rowan asked. "Something soft," Isabel said. "I want our baby to wake up to the sight of flowers every day." "Our baby," Rowan repeated, as if testing the weight of the miracle. "I still can't believe it." "Me neither," she admitted, "but I'm starting to imagine how it will be." Rowan wrapped his arms around her from behind. "It will be complicated, wonderful, and perfect." The Business Association Gala was held at the Grand Highland, and Isabel had never felt more elegant. Her navy blue gown highlighted her eyes and subtly accented the small curve of her 4-month belly. She adjusted her diamond earrings, a surprise gift from Rowan that afternoon. "You look breathtaking," Rowan said, appearing behind her in his tuxedo. "I'm certain I'll meet half of San Francisco's elite tonight," Isabel joked. "And they will see how lucky I am," he replied, kissing her neck. "Isabel, I have something for you." He handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a new ring, more delicate than the original, with diamonds forming a pattern of flowers. "To replace the contract ring," he explained. "This one represents our true heart." Isabel cried softly. "It's perfect." The ballroom was magnificent, filled with the scent of lilies and the sound of a string quartet. Isabel recognized many faces from the business world, but she felt a new confidence. "Rowan!" a male voice called. They turned to see a middle-aged man approaching. This must be the famous Isabel. "I am Mark, Rowan's partner." "A pleasure," Isabel said. "The pleasure is mine. Rowan hasn't stopped talking about you for weeks. You two look radiant." Throughout the night, Rowan introduced her not just as his wife, but as a brilliant partner, praising her vision for Sterling and Sons. It was clear to everyone that this was no longer a marriage of convenience. "Are you feeling okay?" Rowan asked during dinner. "I'm wonderful," she replied. "I'm having more fun than I expected." "Really? I thought you'd find it too formal." "It's interesting to see your world," she said, "and to see how respected you are. I'm proud to be your wife." Rowan took her hand under the table. "Isabel, can I tell you a secret? During all these years at these events, I always felt empty, like I was playing a part. Tonight, for the first time, I feel whole." After dinner, they moved to the dance floor. "You dance quite well," she noted. "Mandatory lessons as a youth?" Rowan laughed. "My mother insisted. I never thought I'd dance with someone I truly loved." As they moved, Isabel noticed the curious stares. "I think we're the talk of the town," she whispered. "Let them talk," he replied, spinning her gracefully. "I only care about what you think. I think this is the best moment of my life." 6 months later, the sound of soft laughter echoed through the house as Isabel opened her eyes to a Sunday morning. Beside her, Rowan was holding Serafina, their 2-month-old daughter, whispering to her while the little one watched him with curious blue eyes, an unmistakable gift from her father. "Good morning, Mommy," Rowan whispered. Someone was hungry and didn't want to wait. Isabel smiled, reaching for her daughter. Serafina was perfect, with dark hair like hers, but Rowan's piercing eyes and a calm, serene temperament. "How is my princess?" Isabel murmured, kissing the tiny head. Motherhood had come naturally, and seeing Rowan as a father was a joy that never faded. "Clara has breakfast ready on the terrace," Rowan said. "And your father called. He's excited for his visit today." Her relationship with her parents had strengthened since the birth. Richard Sterling was a new man, revitalized by both the company's success and his granddaughter. "And your parents?" Isabel asked, referring to Rowan's family who had traveled from abroad to meet the baby. "They arrive at 3. My mother is vibrating with excitement." Rowan had changed completely. The controlled man was gone, replaced by someone who made silly faces to make a baby giggle and sang off-key lullabies without a hint of embarrassment. After breakfast, they settled in the garden under the shade of the pines. "Isabel," Rowan said, looking slightly nervous, "there is something I want to show you." He returned with a folder and a mysterious look. "Remember when we talked about renewing our vows?" "Of course," she said. "Well, I took the liberty. I've reserved the chapel for next Saturday. I've hired the same florist from our first real date." He showed her the invitations with a photo of the three of them taken the day Serafina was born. "It's beautiful, Rowan," she whispered. "I wanted to give you the dream wedding you deserve." "Only one thing," she teased. "I want to choose the dress alone this time." Rowan laughed, pulling her into a careful kiss. "You can choose anything you want, as long as you show up." A week later, in the small stone chapel decorated with white roses, Isabel walked down the aisle with her father. Rowan was waiting, and when their eyes met, she saw that same look of awe. Madeline stood as her maid of honor. The ceremony was filled with laughter and tears. "Isabel," Rowan said during his vows, "you changed my life in ways I never knew possible. I promise to love you and our family with everything I am." "Rowan," she replied, "you showed me that miracles exist. I promise to be your partner and best friend forever." When they were declared husband and wife again, Serafina let out a tiny, happy coo. At the celebration back at the mansion, Isabel danced with Rowan under the stars. "So," he whispered, "how does it feel to be a blushing bride again?" "Like I am exactly where I belong," she answered. "With whom I belong." "None of this was planned," she said, looking at her sleeping daughter and their gathered families. "But the best miracles always arrive when we least expect them." "To our miracles," Rowan said. "To all of them," she corrected. In the journey of life, we often find ourselves clinging to the safety of logic and the cold comfort of contracts, believing that if we can just define the terms of our existence, we can avoid the messiness of pain and the vulnerability of hope. Rowan Montgomery, a king of the night who had seen centuries pass in the stillness of shadow, believed that his heart was as frozen as his biology. Isabel Sterling, a mortal woman burdened by the weight of a dying family legacy, believed that her value was merely a price tag to be negotiated. Yet, when they were forced into the proximity of one another, they discovered that the soul does not recognize the laws of the mind or the constraints of the physical world. Their story reminds us that even when we think we have seen everything, when we think the path ahead is immutable and the doors of possibility are locked, the universe has a way of opening a window to a miracle. The transformation of their cold agreement into a warm, living home is a profound testament to the power of presence. It was not the grand gestures that changed them, but the small, quiet acts of consideration. The books left on a table, the coffee made with care, the shared silence of a moonlit night. For those who have lived many years, we know that the greatest treasures are rarely found in the gold we accumulate or the status we achieve. They are found in the courage to let someone else in, to be seen in our brokenness, and to trust that we are worthy of a love that transcends our circumstances. Rowan's regeneration was not just a medical anomaly, it was the physical manifestation of a heart that had finally decided to beat again after 100 years of silence. The lesson for us all, whether we are in the spring of our youth or the golden autumn of our lives, is to never stop believing in the capacity for renewal. We must be willing to tear up the old contracts we have made with our fears and our past failures. We must be brave enough to step out of the shadows, and into the light of a new possibility, even when it feels terrifying. Isabel and Rowan found that when they surrendered to the truth of their feelings, they didn't just save a company, they saved each other. Their miracle, Serafina, was a reminder that love is the ultimate force of creation, the one thing capable of turning a king into a father and a stranger into a soulmate. May we all have the strength to recognize our own miracles when they arrive, and the wisdom to cherish them with everything we have.